talk. This is how to build an effective ERG, but a lot of other topics that are hitting the Asian American realm and space, and really excited and happy to be moderating the panel. So my name's Nancy Yao. My married name is Nancy Yao Mosbach. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the president of the Museum of Chinese in America. And I'll just say the only thing about that is the word Chinese is not in the mission of the museum. There is major fundamental historical milestones that have happened to Chinese immigrants in this country, including the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And a lot of our museum is about any person entering the museum will have a greater sense of themselves, looking through some of the Chinese immigration stories that have affected a group of people, the only group of people that were officially discriminated against and forbidden to enter the country. So please come by at any time. I think John has some fancy plans around that. But today we have an amazing panel, and there will be opportunity for you to ask them questions. We have, thanks to John and Maria, prepped a lot. So we're hoping still that we can be spontaneous with our responses. And I'll give a quick overview, but you should have seen it in the materials, that we have Alan Chen right here. Can I hear it for Alan? All right.
Can I get my own wig?
Alan Chen. And all these people have day jobs, and then they do this ERG stuff, right? So it's impressive. And he came up from Atlanta, Senior Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, and the Enterprise Chair of the Asian Leadership Network. And find out all about his goody-goody stuff at B of A on his bio. But super excited for him to be here. Joseph Huang. Works at a small firm called Goldman Sachs, managing director, co-head of finance and risk, and also a big part of the APN, the Asian Professionals Network there. And Joseph was so busy last night that he couldn't come to dinner. Because I'm transparent. But he was so good this morning, and he said he's fully prepared, and we did have many calls, and he's going to be fantastic. So excited that Joseph is here with us.
We talk a lot about that.
Yeah, we talked about it. And actually, maybe, I'm sorry, Alan, you're of Chinese ancestry. Joseph is of Korean ancestry, just so we, may have some context. And Yi-Ting Shen. Yeah. She's the most transnational global citizen on this panel. She's the global head of external network management, treasury, and trade solutions at Citi, has worked and lived all over the world, and she's also the head of Citi's Asian Heritage Network, and I believe Chinese ancestry, Yi-Ting, yeah. And finally, the closest proximity to where we are today, we have the amazing Priya Udeshi Crick. Yeah, so Priya is fan base, definitely. She's at New York Life, and she has a very impressive role of Associate General Counsel, Office of the General Counsel, and she has been in this space looking at Asian Pacific networks for quite a bit, and she's the co-chair of the Asian Pacific Circle. So these are the folks who are your cliff notes to starting an effective ERG. But more realistically, we have a lot of topics to talk about in the current state. It's no secret that a lot of things have happened in the last 18 months. Crazy Rich Asians, Andrew Yang, Harvard discrimination case, specialized schools in New York City. The gamut is endless of topics that are related to this group of people, Asian Americans in this city, in this state, and in this country. Also, just to throw it out there, a lot of as people are referring to it, anti-Chinese sentiment. I correct anyone who says anti-Chinese because that implies a much larger group, but the actual sentiment is probably more anti-PRC or anti-CCP, Chinese Communist Party. But again, the blanket terminology that is often used is unfortunately incorrect. There are issues around perpetual foreignness that we deal with all the time. David Henry Hwang has a play called Soft Power that's come out, and there is supposedly 400 projects in the work that deal with Asian Americans in media and film as we speak. Ronnie Chang, Ali Wong, I mean, you name it, the list goes on in terms of new components that are out there telling the story and telling the narrative. So we're really excited that we're all here together. Again, no question is too silly, too informed, too anything, but let's have that dynamic conversation and understand where we might be today. So how we would like to run this is we have a few questions that we've prepped, where I'm encouraging the panelists to provide succinct answers. We'll do maybe a quick follow-up. They will not answer all the questions. And then we'll really open it up for discussion with the audience and your questions regarding this. When you get out of here, you will know everything, and it'll be great.
Tall order.
Yeah,
Tall order.
and we're ready to go. So I wanted to really start with Priya, because the topic of this is ERGs.
Right.
And you have, New York Life is interesting because it's a corporate, it's not a consulting or investment bank that really has thrust into this ERG space much earlier than corporates. But if you could share a little bit from your New York Life perspective, and maybe how it compares to your other places of work, how to create a community centered around this. How difficult is it? Asian America is the broadest group. There are 19 groups that make up Asia America. So how nuanced is it? How practical and effective can it be from your experience to build an Asian American ERG?
Perfect. Tall order. I'll try and be succinct. But before I start, I just want to say, I know you dissed the dumplings. They were delicious. So thank you for doing the wave. But so in terms of our ERG, so New York Life has a number of different ERGs. And generally, before I start, anybody here part of an ERG already?
Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, more than half the room. Perfect. So we'll try and kind of cover both. So if you're not part of an ERG, join one. If you take nothing away, take that away from today, right? But in terms of setting up an ERG, there's obviously you have to connect closely with HR. You got to get a mission statement. You have to have a budget, and you have to have a bit of a vision. And that's just sort of very high level, no matter which ERG you join. In terms of sort of a pan-Asian ERG, it's a little more nuanced, right? Most firms here, they treat Asians as one monolithic group. Maybe we all look the same, maybe we all are the same. So this is where an ERG can be really helpful in kind of bringing out the nuances. So at ours, obviously, we started out with the celebration of festivals. Diwali, Lunar New Year, right? 2 big ones, everybody loves it, more dumplings, big hit, right? But then we thought, we really need to kind of go beyond that and sort of be more than a cultural affinity group, which is great. Don't get me wrong. That is great. It's got its place. So some of the things we looked at and we've done very successfully, sort of one of them is professional development. We're going to talk more about that later, but, as sort of Asian Americans, I think there's always room to grow. We're a very sort of ambitious immigrant group. We're looking to get ahead. We work very hard. We're taught by our parents to study hard and go for those A's. And I think along the way, like sort of professional development, what we worked on is telling your story. New York Life is big about telling your story, but if you had told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, no, I just want to fit in. Like, why do you need to know my story, right? I'm just going to do my work and be good at what I do. But I think in this day and age, with the focus on D&I and diversity and inclusion, it's really important to tell people who you are and where you came from. So we had our membership do a whole training, and then what we had them do is we had them practice with senior leaders at the company. So we did a Cheers for Charity in the Heritage Month of May. We do this every year, 5 Thursdays, show up, you pay $15, that goes to charity, to an Asian charity that we pick, right, very democratic, and you get to tell the people your story. And maybe even learn from other people's story, and you never know what might come of it. And I felt that was a really great way of not just teaching, but also practicing, right? Another thing that we've sort of approached, and feel free to jump in, guys, if this is resonating with your ERGs, is giving back to the community, right? Because as we, rising tide lifts all ships, right? So a focus has been kind of community outreach. So with Apex, which is focused on Asian youth here in New York City, and also on After School All-Stars, which is not predominantly Asian, but it's still focused on underprivileged youth in the city. And then dragon boat racing, right? A great way, partner up with the Queens community in Flushing, set up a booth, tell them what we do, and also sort of liaise with our business team there in our Queens office to sort of raise awareness of the company. So it was sort of a win-win, and we've been really successful at growing our ERG because of this. So the last thing I will say on this is recruit heavily. And I don't mean recruit just Asians, right? Especially if you have millennials, they don't like labels, right? They might fit into more than one box. You might be a woman, you might be mixed, just anyone who has an affinity. So allies, we call them allies. We have so many people that are part of our ERG that are not Asian. And it's been great. We have different perspectives. We also created an advisory board. So not only get senior leadership as a sponsor, create an advisory board, because everybody needs a board of directors, right? Any company needs it. And don't just go for somebody who's got the same background. And we found that that was one way to sort of extend our outreach.
Priya, thank you so much, Priya. And if I can take a poll of the other panelists, and just a quick yes or no, how effective do you think your ERG is at your institution, or do you feel like it's more check the box by senior management, sort of on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most effective? And just give me a number and say, and then we'll go down the line and I'll ask for follow-up. What do you think, Alan?
I would say 9.
Ooh!
So I have a camera here, and I got my HCM representative.
I would say 9, 8, 9 as well.
8, 9. Okay, Yi-Ting?
I would go with 10.
Priya?
Okay, I'll go with 11. The audience has answered for me.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that's good news. Maybe from the audience, just a poll, how many people feel like their ERGs are less than 5%, like less than 5 on that scale of effectiveness? Okay. And where may I ask you?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
Union Pacific.
All right, so we can,
President of our Asian Employee Resource Organization.
great, okay, thank you. So there's a spectrum here. So Priya, that is very interesting. Now, how much of the activities at your ERG do you feel like are more sort of fun, networking, cultural events versus mission purpose related things that might change the culture of your institution?
So when we started out, it was heavily focused on the cultural, festivals, and we always like to feed our membership, right? It brings them in the door and everybody's happy. But I think we're trying to move away to keep it like under 50% on the cultural and sort of focused on the other sort of aspects of it,
Right.
just to grow it.
Eating, because you said 10, now you're on the hook. Well, how do you feel that city then is able to translate the network part of it to actual professional just enhancement or success or development for do you feel like there's a succinct sort of acknowledgement that network, it correlates with someone's professional achievement or ability to be more successful?
Yeah, very much so. I've been with Citi for almost 10 years,
Yeah.
and I started with the London office. We have the equivalent of the ERG, the Asian, we call it Roots Networking Europe. But here in New York, there are a lot of different things going on. In particular, in the past 2 years, the representation is very important, and then from the very top down. So we have 2 most senior leaders for our Asian affinity, and then there are our general counsel, and then also the chief risk officer. They both are Asian representation, and then drawing very large voices, and then making sure that we have proper resources to do the right things. And structurally, we also have the different networks across the country in different regions. They're broadly represented for a variety of Asians, and not just Asians, and Asian Americans. So we try to draw the common themes, even though there are differences, meaning that we have common knowledge or common needs of professional development, the career goals, as well as specific skill learnings, and bring those together. And then in addition, on top of learning, making sure all the cultural awareness, Koreans, Japanese, Vietnamese are different. But making sure that we put the program together. We have a path forward program to allow employees at different levels to learn and being mentored, and seniors are very committed. So the representation is in the form of, for example, we have regular town halls, and they're not just the business town halls, they're the Asian town halls that are allowing people to, ask questions very openly, and we broadcast it worldwide. Whoever wants to join on video calls in the room. So that's very effective, and also informally for holiday gatherings, and then seniors making, ourselves available, answering the questions, and being able to mix and then mingle. And then all these different sort of the professional development programs, they're very carefully sort of planned, along with our HR talent management, making sure that at different levels that we bring internal expertise from across different business lines, also the functional areas, and then we also invite external speakers, whether they're business leaders, like equivalent to our companies, similar diversities, or even just the institutions that where has very specific skills like inclusions, unconscious bias alike, and making all these recordings available for colleagues who may not be live joining the sessions. So very much people feel that being engaged and then wanted to sort of develop, and then there's plenty of opportunities to do so.
And can you share at Citi, what is the structure of the leadership of the ERG group? How does it function in that area?
Yeah. So at the very top, we have affinity, council. So that council is they're very selectively, chosen, being nominated at the C-suite level, right? So it's like our CEO, Mike Corbett's like, general counsel, and then the CROs, and then a few other ones that's being selected. They meet regularly, sort of deciding the key themes every year. What are the things like, for example, like investing in you as a theme, being able to just draw employee in. So entire communications around the themes, the programs around that. Then from that level onwards, then we have the employee networks. We call it like the Asian heritage networks. And those networks, spread all around, but it's not everybody who raised hand, I wanted to start, they can be started. It has a very clear structure, like meaning that the governance program oversight, making sure for each of the network, when they first started, they have to meet certain criteria in terms of the numbers of representation in a particular geography. And then there's also volunteers, not just one, but it has to be a group of representation. There needs to be a list of programming in the foreseeable, 6 to 12 months, and then also making sure the leadership can be sustained. So HR is always represented along with a sponsor. Generally, it's a business sponsor who is willing to commit the funding and the resources to help, on top of what's, in the general, in the HR, the human resource space was given to the employee networks.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And Joseph, at Goldman, I think ERGs and especially networks have been around for 2 decades probably. And can you share a little bit about how they've evolved in your time at Goldman, and also just in terms of the different types of leadership levels, and if, you said a 9 because the HCM guy is here watching you, but just expound on why you think it's effective and how it, on that sort of trajectory of professional development at Goldman, how you feel that maybe Asians may be better representative if they're active in these groups, or do you feel like that's not true?
Yeah, I do think so, very much so. And it's, I think as a general rule, right, being part of these networks, and I think it helps to show that a lot of the struggles that we go through aren't unique to you. A lot of times, I find for myself, it's like, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, I'm talking about getting, I've been told I need to work on my executive presence, about my communication skills, etc. And then you go into these networks and you talk with other people, and you realize, actually, you're not the only one struggling with these issues. And once you start talking with other people and realize that actually, some of these issues are more universal, I think you feel like you're more on a level playing field with everybody else, and feel like it's a much more, I think, manageable problem, a solvable problem, so to speak. And I think working with the ERGs, I think it's a great point, Priya, you made around some of the programming. Some of the things, I've thought quite a bit about is, when you find, talented people within the firm, people that you think have a promising career within the firm, how do you provide them with opportunities, how do you find some of the programming opportunities, ways for them to practice some of the things that I think we as a community kind of struggle with, whether it's creating panels for themselves, hey, why don't you create an opportunity for yourself to practice, being in front of other people, create a panel, talk about something you're interested in, something that speaks to you so that you feel confident speaking about it, but you also get the practice in terms of, speaking in front of other people. And so I think, there's a lot that we can do, within the ERG space to try to create, programming opportunities, networking opportunities as well. I think, one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later is I think mentoring is a big part of, finding ways to improve, your chances at success. There's a lot of studies that talk about, mentorship being a real career accelerant, and finding ways for senior people within the firm, to interact with some of the more junior people within the firm and find opportunities, for those mentorship opportunities to rise and foster.
And as a follow-up to that, and I'll throw out some questions to the audience just to gauge where you are in your own space. How many people feel, if you could just show of hands, that you may have a skill that you want to work on, but you're not quite sure where to go to help build that asset or skill? Does anyone feel that they're not quite sure where to go or the resources aren't available? Okay, that's good. Do people see any other impediments to their professional growth at their firm right now? Well, those are good. Those are, yeah, this is great. 50% are part of the ERGs. Obviously, that's the reason why they're all good. So, okay, thank you for that, Joseph. I appreciate that. And then we'll open it back up to some of the issues that we talked about. I need to ask Alan this, and he's coming from Atlanta, where he's based with B of A there. A lot of people, as Priya also sort of alluded to, these come on as social clubs. Even who are not Asian American, they love Asian American food, they love Asian food, they start getting involved, and then they become an advocate or an ally. And how much of that do you feel is a draw? What percentage of that in your overall mission for your ERG do you feel like that should just be the hook? And sort of like what your percentage breakdown is? I think Priya said it was like 50% on your end. Where do you see your current ERG at B of A, especially being in Atlanta? I mean, New York City, we're the urban Asian American jungle, right? So we've got a lot more exposure there. And what does it feel like in Atlanta and where you are?
I think for us, it is a very big draw, right? Just to get, if you think about anything in general, there's got to be something in it for you in order to be a part of it. Who here knows what fish sauce is?
Oh, I love fish sauce.
Who here can relate with like a non-Asian with fish sauce? One. What about another Asian about fish sauce? No one? Well, the reason I say that is because there is some type of commonality that draws those folks in. And I would say from a percentage perspective, the draw is probably right around 50%. But what I would say is once they get into the organization, it becomes much greater than that. So I think that hook is there, it's for sure. It's just a matter of making sure that they pull that through into what the strategies for that ERG group is going to be.
That's great. And we talked a little bit about mentoring, about sponsorship, about facilitating mentorship. What does that look like at B of A?
We have formal programs that are out there. We do it several different ways through the employee resource group. So if there's capacity to do it, obviously it's there. We do it through local markets. That way you can connect with someone there locally, next to your desk. And then we do it by line of business. That way you have someone that you can connect within your own organization and talk about things that may be pressing within your organization. So for us, it's multifaceted. It gives the opportunity for our associates to really pick and choose what caters to what they're looking for, whether it be a development skill set, will it be a network skill set. You may not want to know someone in your line of business because you want to get to know someone in a different line of business because there's an opportunity there that you might want to pursue. So I think it's multifaceted for us, but ERGs do play a big role in that as well. We have those commonalities that you just don't necessarily see through different cultures. That you can relate to. When you talk to some of the folks that were on the panel today, some of the overarching themes that I've been hearing kind of throughout last night and today was you got to be able to connect with someone personally. And if you want to do that, there's multiple ways to do that. But if you have common cultural references and things like that, it's an easy way to start that dialogue.
So one question I have for each of the panelists, sort of looking more broadly, and please audience also, we'll start opening it up in a little bit. So do ERGs act in a vacuum? So in the sense that we've talked a little bit about the leadership that really exists in this room, leadership for society, leadership at your firms, but does the ERG sort of end up sitting more as a vacuum in the institution? And how much are you encouraging that leadership go out into society, whether it's serving on nonprofit boards, whether it's really trying to change a tide in society? How much of your firms feel like there's a connection, or is it a little bit more like, okay, I'm here, I spend 80% of my time at the firm, and this is good enough for me to feel that sort of connection. But how much is there a desire for those in your groups to say, wait, what's the bigger story? And I know Priya had alluded to that a little bit with the Apex involvement, but maybe we can start here with Alan and then go down the row here.
Yeah, I think for the involvement piece of it, we have certain partners that we work with within the community. The reason that it's important for us is, like anyone else in their day jobs, you typically kind of get stuck in your silo. And you can do very much the same thing in your employee resource groups if you don't necessarily include, whether it be other employee resource groups across, maybe the Latino population or the Black professional groups, whatever it may be. You can kind of get stuck in your own vacuum. And we're all about diversity, right? Diversity of thought. So having those different connect points definitely helps kind of bridge some of those gaps. But at the same time, you can also take a look at that through your nonprofit partnerships in the community as well. You may know what the financial institution is doing. You may know what Goldman's doing. You may know what Citi's doing. But if you connect through a nonprofit that has the ability to bring in different thought perspectives from other organizations outside of your own pillar, financial services could be one. You can have healthcare. You can have civil service, and that nonprofit connection gives the ability to kind of expand that thought. Otherwise, without it, just like everything with D&I, right, you kind of get stuck in kind of these silos, and you're only thinking about, one perspective from kind of from like an organizational perspective. But when you bring in those other thoughts, it helps diversify kind of what you do, but also what purpose you serve as an ERG group as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunities are there. And the way the ERGs are set up at Goldman, it is, very much a divisional type strategy and divisional sort of efforts, within the ERGs that are set up. And I think a lot of it depends on what you, as a leader, as your particular division, want to do. I think for my part, it has been a little bit more insular, so to speak, focusing, I think, at the moment on, I think, improving some of the programming we have to try to create some of the opportunities, try to increase levels of engagement, one within the firm, increase, I think, some of the soft training and the skills necessary, I think, to succeed at more senior levels. And I think broader plans, I would love to be able to do, some of those opportunities to reach out, I think, beyond just the firm. I think some of the opportunities are there, as I mentioned. The volunteer aspects you mentioned, I think, is a great point. I'm sure within all of our firms and many of the firms, for people represented in this room, we do have, a volunteer sort of program, the charity programs, where we do outreach, every single year, and everybody gets, at least one day, to go out and take a day to engage with the community. And for my divisional ERG within finance, risk, and services, we've engaged with the same one every single year, and I feel like the first time you do it, obviously an introductory process, but the more times you go and the more times you interact with the leadership, at the same exact place, the more you understand about it, and the more some of the issues that wouldn't have come out, had you just done the one-time engagement, moved on to a different group, start to come out over the years. And I feel like, over time, we have started to understand more and be able to cater some of the, the engagements that we've had, with them to try to tailor it more to what they need, and finding ways to bring, some of our, Goldman expertise, to that process as well. But I do feel like it is much more sort of dependent, I think, on each divisional sort of leader in terms of how he wants to engage in that sort of way.
Thank you. Yeah, E.T.?
Yeah. So at City side, our sort of personal and professional development practices are very much linked to those cultural aspects. So like for our, cultural programs, there's always components that's linked to professional development. And then it's, never operated in a silo or with a very clear mind that we wanted to help the employee to grow. Like if it's a Lunar New Year or Diwali, we will invite speakers who are relevant. Like, US-China wars, the updates, or things that's relevant in that nature. And sometimes we also have say meditation sessions with the mindset to help people to have better mental health. And we have on-site wellness councils. And then, during different sessions, employees to calibrate with their own stories, and then with a bit of a guidance from the Wellness Council to share and exchange. And oftentimes, we do believe the collaboration, not working in silos just for Asians. We work quite closely with other networks. For example, we have like a family networks. So, for people who are adopted child or who family has different, needs or disability, veteran networks, just put the programs together where we see some common needs and then professional or skill development requirements, and then working that all together. One more point. Here we mostly, based in the U.S. or Europe, less of an Asian culture, but we do have very large presence in Asia. So we seek opportunities to learn more about our Asian business and Asian practice. So sometimes we do those webinars, because at Citi we call those CCOs. It's the city country officers. They're the CEOs in those countries. They share their, country challenges, practices, Vietnam, Philippines, China, Hong Kong. They tell the challenges, like in Hong Kong, there's a lot of different things going on, what's happening, how, as a senior leader, how they dealt with it. And then as employees, we learn, because it's pretty far that we don't personally experience, but through those video conference calls, it helps a lot to help employees engage in that level.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've touched upon it. We're, looking at, we have mentoring throughout the company, and we're looking at an ERG specific mentoring program as well. We're in the process of putting that together. And then I mentioned that we do community work. It wasn't always the case. I think we felt a need to sort of, as we developed and grew and our membership grew and there were more people and there was interest, and we said, okay, you know what, why don't we focus on the community as well? So apart from Apex, After School All-Stars, and then there was even a case, there's an Asian affinity group. I don't know if folks here, if your ERG is a part of it, right? They do volunteer events. And I think even for Crazy Rich Asians, they had bought all the theaters, like they bought out sort of pre-launch, they'd shown the movie, and we all got tickets through them, and there was a party, and we met with other sort of companies and all watched it together and had a little moment about Asians in Hollywood, and it was fabulous. So community has been sort of both sort of in terms of giving back, but also outreach to our peers. So we specifically got to know the Facebook New York team. They reached out, through some business contact, they said, look, we hear you're doing a lot of great things, we'd love to chat. So we met with them and kind of shared some of our best practices, and then they've sort of gone off and gone on to great things. So I think there's great ways to exchange ideas. And what's been great at New York Life is if you have the right support and, oversight in place and your advisory board and, sponsor on board, I think they let you sort of go forth. Yeah.
One short question before we open it up to the audience. What is the major area of deficiency in your ERG group? And then we'll open it up to spur the conversation with the audience. A major area where you really wish that there could be more done, and it doesn't have to be a long answer, but just something around that you feel like, oh, that's my next task for 2020, an area of deficiency that you want to work on. Joseph, you want to start?
Yeah, it's actually something that, Priya, you mentioned with regards to I think engaging with, some of the other, affinity networks and ERGs, within the firm. It's funny, when I first took on the position as head of, co-head of the ERG for Finance, Risk, and Services, one of the first things we did was sit with, the HCM team, and we asked them, it's like, hey, what are some of the areas of development that come out for, Asian Americans, right? And so it was like, everything you might expect, right? Work on executive presence, you got to be louder, right? You got to network more. And then they showed us, very interestingly, what does it look like for blacks? It's like same exact thing, executive presence, communication, delegate more. What about for women? Same thing, executive presence, delegate. And it's like, you hear the same, and it was just an eye-opening experience for me to hear. Actually, yes, we feel these sort of shortcomings, in our own different way because of our culture and our background. But in actuality, some of the broader sort of themes and things that we struggle with are universal and are things that I think everybody can learn and help with. And in terms of, again, upward mobility into the senior levels, finding ways not just to have the mentorship, you obviously want to have that connection with people you can identify with and feel like have taken some of the same steps you're taking now. But I think having that diversity of thought, diversity of mentors is also so important because we are all struggling with some of the same issues. And I think it is being able to connect, I think, more and not just think about diversity, I think, just within the Asian community, but I think more broadly and finding, what works and what was effective, in some of the other networks that we might be able to bridge and gap with and work together, I think more broadly around that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joseph. Eating, I know city's at 10, but is there anything you need to work on?
Yes, I wish our HR is in this room. She's in another room in the other panel. But I will be very frank. I think maybe it resonates to many. I would say financial resources, the budget that's been given.
Yes.
I mean, we have policies saying that all the networks has to have equal resources. I mean, the Asians, we have the largest representation, but with same level of budget, it's a little difficult, but we work way around with it. So getting business sponsors and to, support the level of activities that we wanted to do. Yeah.
Would it be possible for you to disclose how much is in the budget?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
All right. I tried. You can tell us?
Not enough? Is that an answer?
I can tell because people rent the museum for their special events. A lot of ERG groups come. And I'm shocked by the budget line item. Literally, it's like under $5,000 for the year sometimes. And I'm always really, really surprised by that. And that's why I asked the checking the box question, which is like, okay, they're all equal and the budget, and yet it's hard to make a lot of change if people think that's all you can work with, right, for $5,000 for a year of ERG networking or whatever it is. Okay, what do you think? Alan, deficiency.
If I think about deficiency, the interesting thing, from a Bank of America perspective, if you take a look at, the Asian representation within the organization, I will say that the Asian population is very well represented at all levels within the organization. When we talk to our ERG members, the one thing that always comes up is the complete opposite. Like, where are my peers? Where is the representation? Where are my leaders? And I say that because I would love to have a dedicated marketing department to tell our story, because I think when you get around groups of folks that are like-minded, you hear the stories. But there are just so many, and this may be unique to the bank, right? There are so many unique line of businesses. Everyone gets stuck in their day job. They just don't go out and explore those opportunities because it's hard to get to 200,000 people within the organization to tell them about all the great things that are being done. So for me, it's almost having an automatic knowledge. Be good at marketing your ERG because you may be doing good things or you may need help with some other things that are out there. But if you can talk to your people to work or tell that story, I think that will be impactful. So really good at communicating, having a marketing department, being able to tell that story, whether good or bad.
Good, thank you. Priya, deficiency.
So I think you guys touched upon a lot, and one thing we did was having a blog. I know it's so millennial and trendy, right? But just to kind of keep the interest on our events and have comments and let people contribute. I know it's a small thing, but it was just a great way to engage. I would say for us, I don't know if it's the greatest or an area that we sort of focused on as an area of growth, is learning about the company. Because I don't think you can get ahead in your companies, in your day jobs, if you're siloed and you've got your head down looking like this, getting your work done. We talked about networking, but we focus on sort of learning about the company. So we're an insurance company, but we also have, huge investment presence. So as an ERG, we went out, we set up sort of meetings, like a little sort of teach-in, where we heard from the different offices about what they did, cultural markets, what is it like to sell to Asians, try and kind of bring it back to your ERG. And I think it was very helpful. I feel it gave people a better perspective of how, even though they're a small little part, how do they fit into that big picture? And maybe that's a way an ERG can sort of help people in their careers and with retention.
So the deficiency would be how?
I would say an area of growth of how to help people sort of take it to the next level.
Right, connecting the dots on
Yes.
and taking the
Yeah.
content. Okay.
So now that you've done all your sort of leadership training, your executive presence, what's holding you back?
Right.
Right, look,
Cool.
learn about the company.
Did you get all that? All right. So the 4 areas of deficiency, and then we're going to open up to the audience. Please think of your questions now as I remind you what the deficiencies are and how we might be able to work together. I think, Joseph, you're kind of saying network more and understand diversity more. Is that?
I think that's right. I think expand the reach and identify best practices, across all the ERGs within the
Right.
company.
Be more intentional about understanding other groups and expanding and connecting more with other ERGs. Financial resources, how do you increase the budget line at these places so we can actually get things done? Maybe fighting for equality in the sense that it should be maybe proportional to the number of people who are in those groups. Bye. Okay. 3, Alan said just marketing, making sure you're able to communicate what the content is, and then connecting the dots a little bit. So that's a lot of real tactical stuff. Are there questions around some of that we want to? Yeah, I can field questions. Raise your hand and I'll start taking a tally. Yes, please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Hello.
John Wong is leaving the house. Okay.
It's okay, we can probably hear you.
Yeah.
Um,
Your name?
Hi, I'm Christine Chen, and I'm from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Currently, I lead the Asian ERG there. Want to thank the panel for a lovely moderated session by Nancy. Very fun. I can resonate a lot with everything you guys have said. And so the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, our ERG is the second largest within the company. We have a lot of Asians working in the institution. We run a very strong program that runs all the way from dumplings and festivals to professional development and advocacy issues. What I'm finding a bit difficult is actually addressing the white elephant in the room, such as topics like bamboo ceiling, gross injustices in representation at the very senior level of the company versus the overall recruitment issue, right? Because from a recruitment standpoint, Asians are not underrepresented by any means. If anything, we probably overrepresented a little bit. But as you go up the career trajectory, the same situation do not happen. So I wanted to know from any of the panelists as well as anybody in the audience, like what have you guys done from a resource network standpoint to help raise that issue and get traction from HR or anybody else, any other leaders, except for Yiting's company where you have very senior leaders, sitting on top of the Asian ERG.
Great. And maybe what I'll do is, if you would like to comment, and even if you're from the audience, that would be great. Just give me a finger, and then I'll take down your name. So I think Alan's biting here. Yeah. So, and then we'll have someone in the back there respond. Yeah, Alan first, and then we've got.
So I'm not rocking out on my chair because I tasted the Hennessy earlier, but the chair is actually broken, so I apologize. But that's a very good question. When I think about that, I think of Priya mentioned this earlier, right? Thinking about allies, and not necessarily partnering up within your own ERG, but partnering up with other ERGs as well. Because what's going to help that is making sure that you do have representation from the top, from your organization. That way you can continue to pull through whether mentor-mentee type relationships, or just exposure to senior leaders within the organization to bring up that specific population with your organization. So having an executive sponsor that may not be Asian, having joint events with other ERG groups, getting that exposure to senior leaders within the organization. That way it helps develop those folks and pulling them through to the next level.
So think of 3 names by 2:45. And you have a comment?
Hi, actually it's more of an expansion on the question. Very similar question. I was just curious, since especially Yitang says you have a 10, I was curious about what are the behaviors of your senior leadership and your C-suite that actually has helped, help the population along and getting the recognition, so that when time comes, the opportunity is, shared amongst the community. Thanks again.
Okay, Yiting, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll respond quickly. I mentioned a few dimensions already. So sort of like the Asian town halls, very specific. I think the leaders are really from their mind and hearts. We can feel, like I work with them, right? So, but during holiday season, they will sort of say like, shall we do a video recording, send a video message to everybody, right? So just making people feel, and they make themselves available. Like you send an email, right? Like they get a lot of holiday emails, they will respond, right, to people. And then we also have those, internal kind of a Facebook thing, the online community. We will host those virtual sessions. People can ask any questions, and then they will respond. It's not like a 24/7, but it'll have a dedicated time, making, our needs heard, and then they will deal with it. Even though sometimes those questions cannot be answered, but, we have HR sort of representation to get all these questions lined up and somehow getting them all addressed properly. So being heard and then work towards that, yeah.
Yeah, Priya.
So I just want to address something that we've done, and it's been quite successful. And Indra talked about it this morning, but on a much bigger scale. So what we've been doing, because I know this is look, if you're part of an ERG, it's a volunteer gig. You have a day job, which is probably extremely busy. You have a lot of responsibilities, maybe family, other things. This is all volunteer work, right? You're doing it to sort of promote diversity and inclusion. So what we decided to do is we decided to acknowledge people who had kind of gone above and beyond or shown some sort of dedication. And not just an email to them, but an email to their managers. And now our head of diversity and inclusion has taken it to a new level. She just emails everyone from the top of the company down who's connected to that person. We give them a list. Here's what they did. Here's what was great. And off goes that email at the end of the year. It's like the best present for them. They love it. Right? And it's a great way of, these people may not know who you are, but they know you did something for the company, and you're kind of furthering, most of our companies have the same goals, and we're all looking to further diversity and inclusion, so it's a great way sort of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a gentleman right here,
Yeah.
and then the woman right
Yeah, I was
here.
just going to add on to that.
And then we have-
My name is Raj Loknath, and I'm with PepsiCo. I'm also the president of our PepsiCo Asian Network. One of the things we've done is also added it to individuals' performance development plan.
Oh,
So-
added to the performance review?
Yeah, to their reviews. So if you are a leader of a subcommittee, you actually get recognition. And it's a great opportunity for leaders who don't lead a team, but if you're going to lead an ERG, it's another avenue to support your career growth and say, hey, you're an analyst, but hey, you want to be a manager, you're now leading an ERG, so you start to develop those leadership skills as well. So that's another area that working with HR partners start to get people recognition for the volunteerism. And because philanthropy is so important at PepsiCo, this starts to add a lot of value to how we operate.
May I ask you a quick follow-up before we go right here? A lot of people talk about tone at the top at their firms. Could you share a little bit, because Indra Nooyi has been sort of acclaimed to be this person who has really changed the culture at Pepsi. How much do you feel like that tone at the top when she was the CEO made a difference?
It was a significant difference. I mean, there are more folks who look like me at the top, right? Actually, recently, Jim Lee, who's Asian descent, is our new transformation officer, strategy and transformation. So he's our executive lead. So very similar to Citi, right? We have a senior executive in C-suite leading, so that helps. But I think the tone from the top makes it different. Funding, resources, awareness. Even our new CEO today wants to get more involved in ERG. So I think once the leadership elevates ERG as an entirety, it starts to open up the conversations. It starts to open up business opportunities. It starts to look at both community, culture, and your people, right? It's another avenue to support that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, right here. Can you identify yourself? Marie?
My name is Xiaotang Huang. I'm working at the Princeton University, so I'm part of several different ERGs on campus. So just like Alan said, I think it's very important to have the senior representatives at the ERG groups, and I think it's one of the biggest challenge at some groups I'm observing right now is most Asian employees, and most of them are from technology team and or operation team or facilities, and not so many from executives. So our biggest challenge is how to engaging those people from the senior level. We have great programs, but we always lack of the attendance from senior people. I think that's a big problem here is whenever we have a problem, we have events, we talk about what's our concerns, what's the current situations, but those questions never heard from the senior leaders, and those concerns never put into the business action plans. So I'm wondering, panelists or any people in the attendees, do you have any, is there some strategy you guys are using, or do you have any recommendations?
Right, can I get right here in the front row, please? And then behind her after.
Hi, again, Carol Wilson with Union Pacific Railroad, and I'm the president of our Asian Employee Resource Group. So for us, what we do is I have a meeting with my sponsor every month, And so then at that time, I can take all of the, you know, whatever the membership, the concerns and ideas and things that the membership is concerned about, and discuss that with the sponsor. So that, and my sponsor is he's an executive with the company. All of our sponsors are executives, senior level executives at Union Pacific. So we're going to go, it's going to get directly to the CEO and to that group. So I would say one of the challenges that we have with our ERG is we have a very small population of Asian employees at Union Pacific. And just like you mentioned, they're all in IT. Basically, we're all in IT. No one at senior levels, no one at C-suite, especially nowhere near C-suite. So I'm excited to see everyone here. And one of the questions that I had, and hopefully I gave you some suggestions for you, but one of the questions I had was related to how many Asian employees do you have compared to the overall population of your organizations, and how much do you think that contributes to the support or level of support that you all have? Because we're kind of on the opposite. We have 9 ERGs within our organization, and we're probably the smallest, and we probably have the least amount of support. So but again, we're not a global company. I mean, we small, global, but mostly in the U.S., so we don't have, our customers are not Asian descent or Asian, we don't have a very big Asian presence as a company. So I'm just curious if you think it's business driven, the level of support.
Just for my own context, is this the Union Pacific that was the original railroad?
Yes,
firm?
150 year plus.
150 years celebration of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yes.
20,000 Chinese helped build that.
Yes.
7,000 died in the process. So thank you. I'm unfortunately surprised that it's such a small population of ERGs, but thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, we're very small because transportation company, 6% women.
Yeah.
You know, mostly our work is out in the field, so it's understandable. But I'm confused not concerned. Just wondering how much of your support is business driven.
Great. And maybe the first question that was posed is what the percentage of Asian Americans at your firms. I don't know if you're familiar, you know that.
I don't know the percentages, but I can tell you it's well represented at the top levels, which was surprising for me. And what I felt is really there was a drive, but I can tell you based from my peer ERG firms who are a little bit newer and may not have the same sort of representation in the top levels, get an advisory board, right? And allies. They don't have to be of the same sort of group. They don't have to have the same ethnicity, and try and find some connection points to get them interested in your issues. Maybe get them to come on a leadership panel, talk about their career path, and you'd be surprised how much commonality there is.
We have
Yeah.
tremendous structure within
Yeah.
our organization with our ERGs, and the company supports our ERGs across the board.
Yeah.
It's just, we just have a small population,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of
I don't think ours is business driven, but I understand there's, now we're able to see some more synergies because the business is also sort of, minorities are growing as sort of consumers.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I'll give you some stats because I live and breathe this every day. So if you think about Bank of America, right, we have about 208,000 associates at the bank. If you think about ERG members across the organization, we have about 160,000 members. Of those 160,000 members, close to 11,000 of them are part of the Asian Leadership Network. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're specifically Asian.
This is global B of A.
Global B of A, right. So if you correlate that to what census data shows, you have Asian population representing, I was just Googling this, a little bit over 5% of the population. So if you do the math there, it's very similar to what we see like within just the U.S. population, just to give you a sense. And we are very business driven. We are evolving. I think that's the next iteration of ERG groups, BRG groups, is how do you get involved in the potential business making decisions out there, and how can we add value to the bottom line. But that, we're not quite there yet, but from a representation perspective, we're actually pretty well relative to some of the other groups out there.
You're the B of AA at the B of A.
Yeah.
Like, Joseph, did you want to?
Yeah, no, I was gonna, on the business, it may not be necessarily business driven, but it is good business, right? In the sense that I think at the end of the day, right, if you don't see a path, right, if you don't see somebody that you can identify with, at the more senior levels, and you don't see a career path forward, or you don't see a path for you to be able to navigate the firm, you don't. It's harder to retain people, and I think to the extent that you are trying to get senior level engagement and support, that might be one potential avenue and angle to kind of take with that is we need to be able to show that there is a path for everybody within the firm to get to senior levels, and to the extent that we don't have that representation or the representation, it's funny the comments about significant representation in IT and ops. Resonated with me a little bit. We do an annual panel of all the new sort of senior promotes, and the first one that I moderated, we had 5 panelists, and it didn't even occur to me, right? But like 4 of them were from modeling, and from tech, and then 1 person was from investment strategy group. And there was a question from the audience, and it was like, hey, for the 1 person on the panel who is not with a tech background, can you give us an idea of how you navigated the firm? What were some of the challenges you faced? And then it turned out he had just recently transitioned from tech into strategy. And so it's interesting to hear that, and I think people need to see that path forward. To see value proposition within the firm, to be able to to want to stay, and I think having the senior level engagement creates, I think, that sense of loyalty to the company, to the firm. We talked a little bit about mentorship, and I'm such a strong believer in that, simply because people. Senior leaders are people who have navigated the firm, who have gone through, understand the complexities, and have come out, through that gauntlet, and they can impart that wisdom onto, more junior members, and to, I think I'm sure all of us can think of at least one, probably more, people who took us under their wings, when we were more junior and helped us to navigate through the firm. And I think it's finding ways to get senior leaders to tap somebody, see that promising sort of person that's coming through and say, hey, set up some coffee with me, let's catch up. I remember the first time that happened to me, I was just like, wait, what? Like, why is this person asking, to sit with me, having a senior person? And then, it creates so much loyalty to the firm, to loyalty to that person. Like, these are people I would run through brick walls for, even today. And those are, I think, ways to engage, with the employees and find ways to, I think, ways that senior leadership can engage and create, I think, some of those opportunities.
That's great. I have the second row right there. I'm sorry, I missed you so much. And then Tian in the front.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pim Pan. I'm with Macy's, and I lead our Asian ERG with Kay sitting next to me. So I just want to piggyback off of what Alan said and to go back to some of the questions about how do we get the ears of our top leadership. So fortunately, at Macy's, we have D&I on our agenda. So our CEO, C-suite, full belief, top down, ERGs play a role kind of in everything that we do. But something we found that I think would help, for some of these other ERGs where you don't have that kind of robust setup, is figuring out that white space of where you can impact the business or business strategy directly. So just to give you an example, our ERG, we partner with, Kay is in financial planning, and I'm in HR, and I support our merchants. So it's really getting to know the business, right, and asking questions. So we, partnered up with, a beauty team, for example, and identified what were some opportunities within our Korean beauty lines, and got together a focus group of our ERG members to share feedback and impacted the business that way. So it's kind of bringing that plan forward, but also what were the results of that. And I think that can be a starter to get, some attention, and it could bubble up to an even higher level.
Thank you so much. And Tian in the front.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Tian Lee. I'm a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. I do not run our Asian ERG, but I did started the Morgan Stanley Dragon Boat team. And 5 years ago, when I came back from Hong Kong, and last year we won the championship in New York. So first place, we're officially the best corporate Dragon Boat team. We beat Goldman Sachs. Joseph, of course. But I think, just starting back, and I think it's sort of starting an ERG group in itself, because a lot of people, senior people at my firm, have no idea what dragon boat is. And also a lot of my colleagues have no idea what dragon boating is. And so just explaining what dragon boating is in order to get people to be interested is the first challenge. And so the education has to be there in the beginning. But I think what was effective for us, and right now we actually have 3 chapters, one in New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore now, and we have about 95 active members. We practice 6 months of the year, every single Saturdays. It is the most effective ERG at Morgan Stanley, I have to say, because, because no ERG has to meet up every single week, and these people show up every single week for practices. And that's because we have sponsors from different business units. So I know you talk about people who are in technology, but I think it's a way to engage with other business units and educating them and recruiting them, right? And recruiting is by educating people in terms of whether it's dragon boating or whether it's cultural issues or something that you're passionate about. And people have to know that you're passionate about it in order for people to buy in. So anything that you do, and that level of commitment, whoever's leading it, you have to show up, like day in, day out. And I've been showing up dragon boating every single Saturdays. But it does take, a while. But I do have a question for Joseph. Did you go every Saturday? I don't see you at the dragon boat race, Joseph. But I think one of the things that, just being with Morgan Stanley for 14 years, one of the things that I don't think, just from my perspective, not being on the Asian Affinity group there, but it's more of mentorship, right? And you touch base a lot on mentorship. I don't see that at Morgan Stanley in terms of the leaders mentoring younger professionals. I think that's the area that I feel we need to improve on. Is it more of a formal program at Goldman Sachs, or do you think it's more proactive?
Sure. I think it's both. Both as informal and informal. I think the thing about, one of the things I've done is actually kind of, talk to some of the senior leaders, within my division as well. And it's like, hey, look, want to create, a bit more of a mentorship sort of type program, within the ERG. Would you be open to being a mentor, right, to some of the folks that would come through, that come through the program? And, we have a leadership team of about 20 people, and, we're selective within that process as well. We work with ACM to identify, people who are performing well, and we work with the managers of the people who are on the leadership team as well. So we find people who we think have, a path to success within the firm. And I forget who mentioned it, but it's also something that is looked at as part of the promotion process as well. How involved are you above and beyond your day-to-day, right? And so, for people who are aspiring, to more senior levels, being part of that program, being part of the leadership group at an ERG, is another sort of, positive sort of aspect. It's like, when you apply to college, it's all your extracurriculars, within there. And so, I think I've tried to do both a formal and informal sort of thing. I think the problem with formal is, I think, Alan, you mentioned a mentorship has to be a very personal thing. And I think when you have formal programs, that personal aspect really doesn't generally sort of come through. And I think I found the informal to be a lot more powerful because you create more lasting sort of relationships. And in talking to, I think, the people within my group and my division, and it's not just other Asians, but other leaders within the group, and asking them if they'd be open. The fact that I went out and personally talked to them, one, they feel flattered that they got asked, but two, because there was a personal outreach to them, they feel more invested in this as well. And I think for my part, I also have to be selected in terms of who I pair them up with. I can't just pair them up with any person, within the, the affinity networks. Want to find people who are going to be active, make use of that relationship, people that I think will connect well, with the senior leader that I had sort of reached out to. So there is work involved in there, but I think for me, I think to the point about the business side of things, I think for people who provide some of the mentorship, aspects, I find that it's valuable for me because, I find that I learn more about other areas of the firm that I'm not directly involved with. As I see people sort of, move up through the ranks, providing them opportunities, and maybe one day I'll be reporting to them. But also I think, lastly within there, finding a chance, I think, to give other people the opportunity, I think really to pay it forward, all the benefits, I feel like I've had within the firm, and to be able to express that forward with other people within the, others, rising within the firm as well. I think it's just a phenomenal sort of experience. And I think, giving other people, within the division or otherwise, an opportunity to mentor and provide some of those paths, I think they found that very valuable as well.
What's interesting? Like as I think about this, especially your mentorship question and the question about Princeton and senior leadership representation, we don't always do the best job of this, but if D&I is a priority at an organization, all you have to do is ask. And I don't think we necessarily, it may sound simple, but I don't necessarily think we always ask, right? So if you want a mentor, if you're looking for a senior leader, if it's a priority of the organization, all you got to do is ask. Because every time we talk to the C-suite on a regular basis, and every time we ask something, they may suggest, "Oh, I can't do it then. How about this?" It's always about just posing the question. It sounds stupid,
I
but
love that. And Alan, I'm going to take that as your one last key takeaway from this panel as we wrap up, unless you had something pressing.
No.
But I alluded to the Harvard discrimination case earlier against Asian Americans. I think everyone in the room knows the details around that. The big issue around that is, simply put, lack of personality, lack of likability. And challenging some of those stereotypes, although be it often positive seeming, the mono-minority myth and all of that. But I wonder if I can just get Joseph, Eating, and Preet to say, thinking in that as a backdrop of the final question is, what is your key takeaway that you've gained from this conversation broadly that you might go back and say, what can I work on for my ERG to really move this conversation in this very bizarre time that we are all living in? There's a lot of trepidation out there about who we are, where we are we a collective force, are we not, are we individualistic, are we a mosaic, are we a melting pot, all these things around the issues that are prevalent now. If you can just say maybe one key thing that you're going to sort of learn from this crowd and take away with you to sort of work on.
I can start. Sure. I like your last thing. Just ask part. I mean,
ask.
It's true. And maybe this is the whole part.
It's a 9 thing, right?
Yeah.
We didn't get a 10.
Yeah. And I think it's like what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And it's like why aren't we doing more of this? And it's like what is the downside to saying something, right? To asking is. Generally speaking, there is very little downside other than, you're not going to get it. You obviously want to be cognizant about who you talk to and whatnot. But I think having the voice just to begin with is a very important takeaway, and just important just broadly within the career as well.
Awesome. Eating?
Yeah. I want to add to that. I want to say be bold. So not only just ask if any new initiatives, new ERG, new things that we wanted to start. This is the good year, 2020, to get it started. And then when we are bold, and then a lot of the resources naturally come to us, and opportunities come, and then we work together, and then be bold, and then getting more achieved together.
Priya.
Right, you guys have like stolen my thunder here.
I gave it a chance to go first.
I think I would go back to having allies.
Having what?
Allies.
Oh, allies.
At all levels.
Yeah.
Like, don't just look up, look across, and build your network that way.
We're going to ask, we're going to be bold, we're going to get allies, we're going to get execs from the C-suite on our ERG boards, and no one's having fun in any of this, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. We're going to eat dumplings. So the theme of this ERG is dumplings.
Right.
But thank you guys so much, and I encourage you, I know some of you have been looking at your phones and stuff, and you're like, ooh, I got to go take a call and stuff. You've got 2.5 hours more here. Make it worth your time. Engage with one another. Talk to each other. Get all those tidbits and just like, and then go back and do what you need to do. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, this amazing panel.